Alright, so now I can start. So yesterday I talked about Zoroark and I talked a bit about Abomasnow. And one thing, well, a couple of things. So I mentioned in a comment on the video yesterday that I forgot to bring up, or at least I just forgot about it in general, that Abomasnow's ability stacks against an opponent that is both dragon and flying. So against a Rayquaza or an Altaria, they actually have -2 MP if they're within range of regular Abomasnow or if Mega is on the field. And that also means that when you activate Fan Rotom, you can give a Palkia or even a Dialga, or one thing that I should have mentioned, Garchomp. You can give all three of these figures -2. And so that's something I forgot to mention with Abomasnow yesterday. And speaking of Garchomp, so I also gave an example with Zoro when I was talking about Mega Evolved Pokemon and how they can switch with Zoroark whenever their Mega Evolution ends or even when it first starts. Excuse me. And like I said, I gave Garchomp as an example, but thinking about it a little bit more, I think Garchomp might actually be another figure alongside Aegislash that can utilize Zoroark's ability a little bit more often than other figures do. Now maybe I think Aegislash benefits from Zoroark a bit more. So where I'm going with this is that Garchomp, Mega Garchomp, and Gebite, their ability allows them to avoid battles. And so that means that Zoroark can switch with them even while they're, progressing through the field, because you can air balloon, jump over your opponent attacks, you can still jump through and prevent Garchomp from being in a battle. Now, like I said, I think Aegislash benefits more from Zoro because it doesn't have an ability like this to just protect itself. But I think if you wanted to, if you really like Zoroark, I think Aegislash and Garchomp are two of the figures that can take the most advantage of its ability. So when I was thinking about what to talk about, I was having a little trouble deciding, but I figured, I talked about some figures that maybe people didn't use a lot, or they stopped using after a while. But I thought it might be interesting to talk about Garchomp today. And this is a figure that just completely, it didn't overtake the meta, but sort of overnight when the update came, Garchomp got its ability and its Mega in that one update. It shot through the roof in terms of usage and how much you saw it in the meta. So I thought maybe I would just talk about why it's so good, what it can do. Yeah, I guess that's about it. Now, this might be a little redundant for people. Not that anyone watches this anyway. But a lot of this people probably already know, because if you were playing at the end of the game, you definitely saw lots of Garchomp. But let me bring up the board and figure out where I want to start with this. So I guess I'll just do what I normally do. We'll start with the ability, because this is the main draw, aside from its typing. But let's read it. So it has Sand Veil. If this Pokemon is attacked, it can move under the opponent's Pokemon to another space next to it. A battle does not occur. And this is actually something that may have been confusing the first time you saw it. Yeah, give me a second and I'll explain what I was talking about just then. But yeah, just to, in case you're not aware, this means that any figure, Garchomp anywhere on the field, if it's attacked, can move through the figure. But that's not entirely true. And this is what I was alluding to. If an Aegislash or a Kartana or something attacks it from range, its ability says it moves under the opponent's Pokemon, but that's a little misleading because the key point of this is it moves to another space next to it. So this means that if Aegislash attacks a Garchomp, Gabite, or Mega Garchomp from range, any space next to Aegislash, Garchomp can move to. So these two are what people would normally assume because you move under it, but it's also in front of it here because it's any space next to it. Usually you would go past it, but sometimes if your opponent isn't aware of this, maybe they block these sides because they're like, oh yeah, I've got it now, but you just moved to this point. And this is an extremely annoying ability, especially in combination with Air Balloon. So this is probably one of the best ways to just like stall out the game, or wait to build up Z gauge, because if you have Gabite or Garchomp on your goal, or any point you want to protect, and it has an Air Balloon, and your opponent attacks it, you can move over with the ability on your opponent's turn, and then jump over and land and end your turn, and just do that over and over and over, because your Air Balloon never runs out, because you're never in a battle. And so a lot of times you would just do this. If you're in a bad situation, Garchomp actually helps become a decent goalie just because of this. And so during this time, Z gauges are going up, and eventually you can jump over Tectonic Rage and get rid of this, hopefully. Now unfortunately, Garchomp only has one good Z move. Devastating Drake, I don't know what they were thinking with the design for this. It may have been like okay if the damage was 70, like Draco Meteor. I think it would have been even better if it was like 30, because then maybe you can snipe a Mew or a Celebi as well. Well, wait, no. Mew. Mew's not rolling a white with 30, so that doesn't matter. My bad. But yeah, Devastating Drake, its requirement is too high, rolling and landing a white with 120 or more. There are a lot that has that. Other Garchomps, Dawnwings, Palkia, Steelix. Like, yeah, lots of things have a strong white attack, Arceus. But you spin your Z move, making your opponent spin to only potentially have it get knocked out. Now yes, it's anywhere on the board, but because it's not guaranteed, that's the good thing about Z moves, is it's usually something guaranteed, and that's why you use it. But Devastating Drake is just another spin. So like, why burn your Z move just for a random chance? But anyway, Tectonic Rage carries it. That's all it really needs. As long as it has Tectonic Rage, you're good. So, even though Garchomp has a mostly white wheel, you're because of its ability, you're just not afraid of most anything your opponent has. So essentially, your opponent is forced to either just ignore it and not attack it, or they need two or more figures, to prevent Garchomp's ability from protecting it. So this usually means that other lanes or other sections, are a little less guarded, I suppose. Um, Early game, your opponent still has everything around here, something like this. But usually, like I said, usually it takes your opponent more resources just to deal with this one figure because of that ability. And so now I want to bring up, so you have Tectonic Rage to attack with. Your white attacks are okay. And sometimes you can use Double Flight to, like you can actually cross the board pretty quickly, depending on how things are positioned. Garchomp can move over, let's see, I'm trying to think of a practical setup. I don't know, maybe you move Garchomp here, like you're sort of, well, no. Okay, yeah. I'll say that, I suppose. So sometimes you can use Garchomp like a Dawnwing sometimes, like maybe something else is here. You can air balloon your Garchomp to this point and just wait. Well, this isn't a good example, but the idea I'm trying to get across is that you can air balloon over something and then attack and potentially double flight to move 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces in one turn with Garchomp. And it's actually not a bad idea. It's not entirely necessary, but it's not a bad idea to run Garchomp from Gabite. Mostly because of the purples. So then you have 3-star double flight on Garchomp, which means you can double flight a Dawnwings. And you have 3-star Draco Meteor on Mega Garchomp. And Draco Meteor is actually a very good move. Just like Devastating Drake, it's not a guaranteed thing. But being able to potentially snipe something from anywhere is kind of nice. And its requirement is a lot lower, 70 damage. So that means about 50% of Arceus's wheel loses to that. Lots of things have a decent amount of white. Other Garchomps, of course. So Draco Meteor is a pretty good move. Earthquake is Earthquake is scary. It's definitely scary because this can be really bad for you. Let's see. So, but you might be looking at this and saying like, yeah, it has Tectonic Rage. Yeah, it has the ability to just let it stall things out. But it's still just a lot of white. One thing helps this, and that's that Mega Garchomp burns things when you jump over using its ability, and that's really nice. Now, not too many things are like devastated by burn, but it at least gives you a better shot, giving something a little bit of miss, a little bit less damage. But that also sets up Double Flight to potentially KO with it. Actually, that's something I forgot about Double Flight, is that you can attack a second time if you land Double Flight. um, wait, the music's not coming. There it is. So you can potentially cover even more ground with double flight. Just because you can use it multiple times. This is really rare to set up. But, you know, sometimes it might happen where Garchomp double flights over this figure, and then you can attack again and double flight over this figure. And actually, if you move before doing that, let's say you're on the bench and you have an opponent's figure here and here, you can move all the way to this point if you get lucky. Like this is unlikely, but it is a possibility with Garchomp. You move from the bench here, attack double flight, attack double flight. And if you get to this point, this is another point. Let's clear the rest of this. Next to the goal is, or excuse me, having Garchomp or Mega Garchomp next to the goal is really tough for your opponent. If they don't already have something to block here, like if they have to come out from the side and attack Garchomp, this is where it's scary. It has to be a figure that can move over Garchomp, because you spend one turn attacking it. Garchomp is just like, nope, jump over here, and then you air balloon or you mega to come back to this spot. And your opponent has to move onto the goal here at this point. And if you were a mega here, you know, you burned it with doing this, which means maybe you can come and attack it here now. And I think this is where I want to start talking about a ridiculous plate, mostly for Garchomp, but Steelix uses it pretty well as well, and that's Golden Sphere. Choose one of your ground-type Pokemon until the end of the duel. While that Pokemon is on the field, all the white attacks of your evolved ground-type Pokemon become gold in their first battles after moving to the field. So only the first battle, but like I said, when I was talking about Zoroark, when you evolve from Gabite, like if you Tectonic Rage and Gabite evolves, that Garchomp is now new and can use Golden Sphere immediately. When you Mega Evolve, that Mega Garchomp is new and can use the Golden Sphere effect, and when you revert from the Mega, that Garchomp is new, so you get the gold again. So now this is a figure that avoids battle with your opponent so often, and when it's ready to attack, it has this huge gold wheel that does a ton of damage, mind you. Outrage does, if you're only coming from Garchomp, it does 210, it does 220 if you come from Gabite. Earthquake is 190 or 200. And even Garchomp itself, if it's chain 10, you're hitting 170. If it's evolved, it's 180. And that's a lot. And Mega Garchomp also removes blues. So now, with Golden Sphere, Garchomp essentially doesn't lose to anything, except for a gold into its Draco Meteor. Now, of course, Garchomp is afraid, like a lot of things, it is afraid of Celebi. But that's only one figure out of 6 on your opponent's team, and most of the other 6 Garchomp can deal with. And even if Celebi is here, Garchomp can Tectonic Rage it. So you have options to deal with basically everything. Garchomp can deal with essentially everything in the game. Let's see, what else can I say? Maybe just that I don't know. Yeah, I guess maybe I can start talking about something else, but I want to wrap up a little bit and say all of these things are why I think Garchomp, uh, I consider him maybe like the third best figure in the game. Um, I'd like to see what other people think of that. The only ones I'm putting above it are Dawn Wings and Palkia. But it's just a combination of all of these things. A figure that your opponent has to have multiple figures to even attack into it, or like a setup before you can attack it. If you do attack it, if it has Golden Sphere, it's a huge gold wheel, does huge damage. Double Flight can potentially, win you stuff. Like if you, well, I already said this, but the burn from Mega Garchomp is somewhat significant because of that, because it sets up Double Flight and it reduces their damage and gives them a miss. But it has Tectonic Rage, goes through everything. It's just insane. Now I think even without Golden Sphere, Garchomp still would have been pretty top. Like I saw a lot of people running Garchomp even without Golden Sphere, and I ran it without Golden Sphere as well, and it performed very well, just because it's extremely strong outside of that, no matter what. Because you can, like I said, you can just stall out using your ability until you can Tectonic Rage, and of course you have other things too. You probably have your own Dawn Wings and Palkia to attack with, or Steelix. Okay, that's probably all I need to say. That's all stuff people know. But like I said, I did want to mention the thing about Zoroark, and that Garchomp can actually use it as an extra option for survivability, more often than other figures can. Let's see, I didn't have anything else planned for what I wanted to talk about. Let's see, maybe I'll just do a short discussion about Mega Ampharos. This is actually one of my favorite figures in Pokemon Duel. So yeah, why not? Okay, so Mega Ampharos, this figure came out I think about the same time Nihilego did, when they were first bringing in Ultra Beasts. It may have been the same banner as Nihilego or the one after. I don't remember. Either way, once again, we'll start with the ability, because this is all you play Mega Ampharos for. As you can see, its wheel its wheel is not spectacular. So the ability is what you're here for. When it appears as a Mega Evolution, and again when its Mega Evolution ends, you may move one of your Pokemon in the Ultra Space or PC next to this Pokemon. And it doesn't specify your PC, so Mega Ampharos is actually one of the few ways you can take figures from your opponent's PC back, if they get a takeaway or if they surround you with a Mighty Sphere. Mega Ampharos can pull figures from their PC back to you. And this is really significant. So Ampharos is not an attacker. It can be, I suppose. But it obviously it loses to anything purple. But so what this means, this is essentially, some people might think of it as a double max revive, but it's much better than max revive because there's so many more things you can do with it. The first thing, and people know this, I'm just kind of shooting the breeze about it. Wow, that was a sentence, but I'm just kind of talking about what I like about it and what it does. So anywhere on the field, wherever Ampharos is, when you Mega, you pull the Pokemon from the PC to a point next to Ampharos. And that's why it's better than Max Revive, because you get figure advantage back, but you also get a bit of board advantage. Now, obviously, the positioning, you can't like choose exactly where it goes. It has to be next to Ampharos, but that's still incredibly strong. So we'll talk about. I'll talk about how Ampharos is used defensively and offensively. And I think the offensive part is probably to me, the most interesting part. So a lot of times Ampharos is in the back because because even the regular one, it loses to a lot. Loses to every Z move. The only way you really survive against a lot of things is by hitting Beacon Light. So probably, if I were to use Ampharos, I would probably recommend just maxing out Beacon Light, just because of that. That's essentially the only way you survive a lot of things. Now it can actually, it can actually take out a Mew or Celebi or a Marshadow, and that's nice. But that's about it, just dealing with runners. So yeah, what Ampharos provides defensively is essentially just allowing you to keep up with your opponent's pressure. So like if they're winning, there's a bunch of pressure going on. I'm not going to draw everything. This is just random stuff. I can have Ampharos here. Like if Ampharos is in the back and stuff is happening, I can Mega here and bring a figure right here to block this thing. Like if this is what's attacking, and when this gets taken out, I can then move Mega Ampharos here, and if they attack Mega Ampharos, I get to max revive something else here again, and then either move towards the goal or put it back here. So that was essentially 3 turns of defending against this one figure with just Mega Ampharos. And hopefully within that time you can survive at least one attack. But even if not, you're building Z gauge, stuff like that really helps out. And it makes for a decent defending figure as well, because if Ampharos is sort of hanging out in the back like it usually is, actually right here, well, I guess it's hard to put it here because it's 2 MP, so maybe even here is okay. You can Mega here, bring a figure here, hopefully a 3 MP, move on to the goal. Like maybe you revive the Celebi, move here to defend, and when your opponent KOs it, you get another figure back here. So that's what I would see a lot, and probably the most common situations for Ampharos is defensive stuff. But if you do manage to push Ampharos up the board, you can use its ability really aggressively, mostly at the end of its Mega. So when I was using it, one thing I would try to look for is essentially using, in a way, you can kind of use Mega Ampharos as somewhat of a 3 MP figure. And what I mean by that is that if I Mega in the back, I bring something back, sure. I can then, at the end of the Mega, if I can push forward, I can then drop a figure at the end of my evolution, here or here. And depending on what it is, if I have a 3 MP, probably put it on the entry point, or if I just want to seal it, put it there, or a strong 2 MP figure here, like a Dawn Wings, to threaten goal. And so that having sort of that extra position that you can steal with Ampharos is one of my favorite things about it. But then there's also this became a lot less likely when there were things like Palkia running around, but if you can get a KO with Mega Ampharos, like if you Z move into a Marshadow or something, on the last turn you can steal that space with a figure that Ampharos brings back as well. And again, this, like I said, this is harder to pull off towards the end of the game. Excuse me. But if you can push Ampharos up, and you Z move the goalie on the last turn, you can get rid of this figure and then drop a figure from your PC here. So that's another really cool thing. So let's see, maybe just a couple more things. I actually think it's not, Ampharos isn't actually a bad figure to try to push up. It's a lot harder than other figures, obviously, because it can't move through stuff, and it can't really attack into a lot of stuff safely. However, because of its ability, you can be really aggressive with it without losing too much. And this isn't as good as Palkia or Dawn Wings or even Mega Mawile, like I was saying. Because you do lose rolls with Ampharos, but you don't lose a lot of position, because if this figure is KO'd, then you can just bring something back from the PC and sort of reset what the board state was before that. I actually want to look, because like I said, there's a lot of things it can't deal with, but some things it might not have too much trouble with. Well, I might be grasping at straws there. Like I said, mostly runners probably. Yeah. Alright, that's probably about it. I also want to mention one last thing. There's actually a clip of this on Reddit, so maybe I'll leave a link to that post. It's a 2-year-old post, but I have it saved, so I think I can link it. But it's a really cool play with Ampharos. So since it brings things back from the Ultra Space... Oh, actually, that's something else I want to mention. That it can help mitigate Menacing Moonray's Maelstrom, because you can bring the figure back early with it. That's just something small, though. What I was going to say is that there's a really cool play that you can do with Ampharos and Celesteela. And I'll just explain what the clip was like on Reddit. So when you Rocket Ride, you send a figure 3 steps away from Celesteela, so 1, 2, 3. And Celesteela goes to Ultra Space. So the idea that you can do with Ampharos is Rocket Ride on Ampharos' last turn to put Ampharos here, and then the Mega ends, and you can bring the Celesteela back immediately and put it here. And then you're actually in range for another Rocket Ride to go straight onto the goal. This is a really specific play, and even the person who posted it said that this is really hard to pull off. But I think it's a pretty cool strategy. Even if you don't win in one turn with it, Rocket Ride Ampharos is very cool. Because anywhere on the board, if Celesteela is here and Ampharos is next to it on either one of these points, you can throw it here, and then even if the Mega doesn't end, and this is why I think Celesteela is probably the best partner for Ampharos, because you can move Ampharos all the way up the board like this without it having to battle. You get those situations that I was talking about where now if you have a shot of Z moving, you can KO this and place a figure here, or even if you have a 3MP in your PC, you can move here, hopefully on the last turn, and put the 3MP here, and now you're threatening us around. So yeah, I'm glad I brought that up, because I think Celesteela helps a lot of the weaknesses of Ampharos. And Ampharos itself recycles Celesteela, so you can get more rendezvous, which means essentially a deck like this, I don't know how viable. Well, Celesteela was a good deck on its own, and people would run Ampharos. I don't think you build a deck specifically around Rocket Ride, but that is a play that you can do in that deck. And I think that's actually a really nice deck, because if you hit Rendezvous, obviously it's now even because you and your opponent both lost a figure, but you can bring it back with Ampharos, and you're bringing figures back from the PC with Ampharos, which means you're constantly keeping up advantage over your opponent. And I think Mega Ampharos, probably the only time I would run multiple of it is in a deck with Celesteela. At least 2 Celesteela probably. Just for that fact, because you want to use Ampharos so much with Celi, having 2 really is probably what you would want. Is there anything else I can say about Ampharos? Maybe not. But yeah, those things are why I love Ampharos. It keeps up advantage. You set up a lot of cool plays by having, moving up and placing a figure here to get us around maybe. Lots of stuff. And you can even use it to, like, maybe if it's in a Celesteela deck and your opponent's board is sort of cleared out. One of the worst things is to lose to a 3MP figure while you're both sort of low on figures. And so Ampharos can actually help push up in those situations. Because if you Mega, you can leave something behind while you move up, which means you're still protecting your goal from sort of a sneaky play like this. Okay, so I thought yesterday's episode was bad, but I think this one was maybe even a little bit messier. I might take a break tomorrow then, just to sort of refresh. Hopefully have a more coherent video next time. But I think that's it. I'll go ahead and end.